Kabir opened LinkedIn on a Sunday morning and felt something collapse quietly in his chest. A former classmate, someone he had barely known in college, had just announced a 7-figure exit from a company she had started 3 years ago. The post had 400 comments. People he respected were congratulating her. Kabir was 29 years old. He had started his own business 8 months ago, a small design consultancy, and he had, in 8 months, exactly 3 clients, a bank account that made him anxious every time he checked it, and a persistent, quiet voice that told him he was already behind in a race that other people seemed to be finishing while he was still tying his shoes. He closed the laptop. He sat in the silence of his apartment and thought a thought that had become increasingly frequent over the past few months. Maybe I started too late. Maybe some people are just built for this and I'm not one of them. Maybe 8 months in, with 3 clients, I should already know if this is going to work. And the fact that I don't know is itself the answer. Before we go further into Kabir's story, if you've ever opened social media and felt exactly what he's feeling right now, this channel exists for exactly this moment. Hit subscribe now, because there is a very good chance you'll need the next story just as much as you need this one. Kabir's cousin Vikram had started a business 2 years before Kabir did, a small logistics company that was now, by any reasonable measure, thriving. Vikram had 14 employees. He had recently bought a house. He spoke with a settled confidence that Kabir found both admirable and quietly painful to be around, because it reminded him of a distance he had not yet closed. Kabir called Vikram that Sunday evening, not entirely sure what he wanted to say, just wanting to talk to someone who had walked a version of this path before him. "I don't know if this is going to work," Kabir said, after some initial conversation that circled the real subject without landing on it. "It's been 8 months. I have 3 clients. I saw someone from college today who just sold her company for millions. I feel like I'm already behind and I haven't even really started." Vikram was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Can I tell you something about my first 8 months that I don't usually tell people?" Kabir said yes. Vikram said, "At 8 months I had 1 client, not 3, 1. And that client was my uncle, who gave me the contract mostly out of family obligation rather than because my business had proven anything yet." Kabir stared at his phone. "I had no idea," he said. "Nobody knows," Vikram said. "That's exactly the problem with comparing yourself to anyone on the outside. You are comparing your actual, visible, difficult beginning to their polished, distant, already successful middle. You are not seeing their 8-month mark. You are seeing their 3rd or 4th year compressed into a highlight reel that looks like it happened easily and quickly, because that's the only part they chose to show you, and possibly the only part they even remember clearly themselves." Kabir thought about the LinkedIn post. 400 comments. A 7-figure exit. He had no way of knowing what her first 8 months had actually looked like. He had assumed, without ever examining the assumption, that her current success meant her path had been smoother and faster than his. He had no evidence for this. He had only the visible surface of a much longer and almost certainly more difficult story than the post suggested. If you've caught yourself doing exactly this, measuring your chapter 1 against a mullet or hunders, someone else's chapter 20, drop a comment below with the word same. I promise you will not be the only one. Sometimes, seeing how many other people are carrying the exact same weight is enough to make it feel lighter. Kabir's mentor, a woman named Elena who had been running her own consultancy for over 15 years, and who Kabir had met at an industry event a few months earlier, told him something a few weeks later that reframed the entire question for him. He had mentioned his frustration to her over coffee, the sense that 8 months in he should have more to show, that something must be wrong if the growth felt this slow. She had listened, then asked him if he had ever heard about the Chinese bamboo tree. He said no. She said, "There is a particular species of bamboo that, once planted, appears to do almost nothing for the first 4 or 5 years. You water it, you tend to it, you watch the soil where you planted it, and for 4 or 5 years, nothing visible happens above the ground at all. No shoot, no growth, nothing to show anyone who asks how the bamboo is coming along. Many people, understandably, give up during this period. It looks, from every visible measure, like failure, like the seed was planted in the wrong soil, or tended incorrectly, or simply was never going to grow at all. But underneath the ground, during those 4 or 5 years, something else is happening entirely. The bamboo is building an extensive root system, wide, deep, far more extensive than the root systems of plants that show visible growth much sooner. And then, in the 5th year, something remarkable happens. The bamboo grows roughly 80 feet in 6 weeks, not because those 6 weeks contained some sudden burst of extraordinary effort that the previous years lacked, but because the 5 years of invisible root building had created the foundation necessary to support that growth once the growth became visible. If you had measured the bamboo at any point during those first 5 years against a different plant that grew visibly faster from the beginning, you would have concluded the bamboo was failing. You would have had no way of knowing, from the surface, what was actually happening beneath it. Kabir sat with this for a long moment. 8 months, he said slowly, might just be root building. Elena nodded. It might be. You don't know yet, and neither do I. But I can tell you this. The Pir Hadarin Bedentimshil Nimbi, businesses that eventually grow 80 feet in 6 weeks almost always look, at 8 months, exactly like yours looks right now. Uncertain, small, slow. That is not evidence of failure. It's often simply what root building looks like from the outside, before there's anything visible to show for it. Kabir went home and thought about his 3 clients differently than he had been thinking about them. He thought about the systems he had spent the past 8 months building, quietly, without much to show for them yet. A refined process for onboarding new clients, a portfolio that was slowly improving with each project, relationships with 2 potential collaborators that had not yet turned into anything concrete but that felt in a way he could not fully explain, like roots extending outward into soil that would eventually support something larger. He stopped checking LinkedIn every morning. Not because he decided, in a single moment of willpower, to stop comparing himself to others, but because he had found something more useful to focus his attention on, the actual work in front of him, the actual root system he was building, one client conversation, and one refined process at a time. 14 months after that phone call with Vikram, Kabir's consultancy had grown to 11 clients. Not the explosive growth of the classmate's 7-figure exit, but steady, real, built on a foundation he now understood had needed those first 8 quiet months in order to exist at all. He called Vikram again, this time to share something rather than to seek reassurance. "I think I finally understand what you meant," he said, "about the 8 months. Vikram laughed. "It took me almost 2 years to understand it myself, looking back. You're ahead of where I was." Kabir thought about this, about the specific comfort of hearing that someone he admired had once stood exactly where he was standing, uncertain and slow, and quietly convinced that something was wrong. He thought about the bamboo, about the 80 feet in 6 weeks that could not have happened without the 5 invisible years beneath the ground. He thought about his 3 clients, once counted as evidence of failure, now understood as the beginning of a root system that was, even then, already extending further than he could see. If you are in your own 8 months right now, if the growth feels invisible and the comparison feels heavy, this is exactly the reminder this channel exists to give you. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And if you want to, tell us in the comments how long you've been building your own roots. However long it's been, it's exactly long enough. Nothing is wasted. Sleep well tonight. Somewhere beneath the surface of your life, the roots are already further along than you think.